Welcome everyone to our 8th and final Inclusive Solarize workshop today as part of our residential solar cohort. Today, we're going to be focusing on the campaign launch, and exclamation point there, because excitingly, this is kind of the culmination of all of our previous workshops and really getting to this point of enabling communities to launch their campaigns. As a reminder, we've gone through community partnerships, campaign structure and goals, financial barriers, RFP development, developing the campaign website, comms and outreach, and selecting the installer over the last 5 or 6 months. And again, today is kind of the culmination of all of that. And for those communities that have already launched their campaign, hopefully this will still be a helpful workshop on the campaign management side of things, because we'll also talk about ongoing campaign management after the launch. So we have 2 desired outcomes today for participants. The first is to understand the launch event, logistics, content, and communication strategies. And the second is to prepare for ongoing campaign management, like I had said. So these 2 desired outcomes is how we framed the workshop today. So as always, we'll have about 10 minutes in a minute here for introduction to check-in question. And then we'll get into the first main part of the workshop on campaign launch event logistics. So we'll hear from Tushar, who's going to provide a framing of that conversation. And then the majority of the time will be presentations and Q&A from Solar United Neighbors and Connecticut Green Bank. And the next section is going to be on ongoing campaign management. And we will be having a Q&A panel with Philadelphia Energy Authority and Solar Crowdsource. About 20 minutes for community breakout exercises. And then lastly, at the end, we have about 10 minutes for cohort feedback, which is important in this last workshop, so that we can always improve our cohorts in our future iterations. So please stay on until the end to fill out a short survey that is helpful for our team.
In this section, we're going to focus on the Solarize launch event and doing the campaign launch. Solarize launch is one of the most important campaign events. It helps build excitement and momentum for the campaign, provides essential information to participants, and introduces them to the solar installer, the solar ambassadors. So this is really a great opportunity to build trust and credibility, and get the campaign on started on the right foot by showcasing local leaders and organizations who support the campaign. So we're gonna, for the most part, focus on 2 presentations, one from Corey at Solar United Neighbors and another from Emily at Connecticut Green Bank. And I'll introduce them more formally a little bit, but they're both experts. We'll go into the details on the types of campaign launch events that they typically host and how they plan for them. Before we hear from them, I'll run through a quick outline of things to consider as you plan for the launch event. So first, some key logistics you'll want to think through. When planning the event, you'll want to pick a date and time. The event should typically take place 2 to 3 weeks after you begin campaign outreach, so that residents have enough time to plan ahead. You want to think through location. Of course, right now, a lot of events are being held virtually, so you may just confine the launch to Zoom. However, as days are getting warmer and for campaigns that are beginning later in the year, there may be a possibility of outdoor distant events. Whether in-person events should always take place at a public venue that's accessible, located within or near the neighborhoods you're prioritizing. And similarly, all events, whether virtual or in person, should be at a time that works for the folks you're trying to reach. So that's thinking about location, content, and speakers. So you really want to think about like what you'll be, presenting or talking about at the event, and I will speak more to this in a moment. And then another thing to think through is how participants will sign up. You want to design for how attendees will sign up for the campaign during the event, since that's a great source of, great way to generate interest and follow through with folks. So focusing a little more on the content, launch events typically have the following types of speakers and content. So you want to probably start or have an endorsement by a trusted community leader, and we've discussed a number of ideas for community leaders in the check-in question. But starting with enthusiastic support from the community and local government leaders really helps build legitimacy and trust for the campaign, and also is a great way to generate press coverage. So definitely want to stress that if you can get the mayor or city council on board, you'll probably get some press coverage, and so that's a good idea. You'll probably want to spend some time in the launch event, and it could be brief, but spend some time talking about what Solarize is, how the campaign works, why folks should join. So stressing things like discounts, financing, grants if you have them, but also the installer vetting process and the technical support really makes sense here. And also include the timeline, the process to sign up. Then a lot of launch events might feature the featured installer for your campaign. So have the installer talk about their business offerings, pricing structure, any additional services they provide. And if you have a financial institution that you're partnering with, then having them on to explain the details, their loan products might also make sense here. A big part of Solarize is keeping things interactive and having folks, build community and talk to their neighbors. So, something that we see in launch events is just keeping time for participants to interact with community partners and solar ambassadors and with each other. So, even if your meeting is on the Zoom, you could use breakout rooms as we do in this workshop, and have small groups of attendees speak to each other and to program volunteers or staff. And then, probably find some way to close at the event. I'll mention that we have developed a campaign launch event presentation slide deck template that can be helpful when developing slides. So we've basically created a template, especially when you're explaining how Solarize works, and we have these little call outs, like you can see here, where we have a slide deck template, and on each slide we have some instructions on how to modify it to your local context. So that's something you can use if that's helpful, and modify in any way you like. The last element I'll speak to is that in advance of the event, you want to align your communications and outreach to advertise the event. We talked about communication strategies extensively in workshop 6, so feel free to look at that material for more detail. But in brief, think about the different ways that you want to spread the word. So there's social media, develop sample social media posts or a toolkit that campaign partners can easily use to ensure that partners know when and how to start promoting the event. Local media is really important. We heard from some of our experts in the last couple of workshops. Really sending a press release to local reporters about 1 week before the event is one good strategy. And as a reminder, focusing on hyper local media outlets, neighborhood newspapers, is often more effective than, say, a community or citywide media outlet. Event listings are another good way to spread the word. So request that the event be listed on the calendar of local papers, on online websites and blogs, websites such as Eventbrite, and also on the websites of your community partners. And then email invitations or direct invitations that come from partner organizations, so to folks on their listservs, and then also even just the personal networks of the organizers can go a long way in getting folks to attend. So with that, I'm going to, with that outline, I'm going to hand it off to our experts to go into more detail on how they organize their campaign launches. So we're going to hear from 2 experts, Corey Ramson, who is Vice President of Go Solar Programs at Solar United Neighbors. And Emily Basham, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, maybe correct me, but okay. Who's Senior Manager at Connecticut Green Bank. Both of them have a lot of experience running campaigns and doing events, so really looking forward to hearing their insights. And we can start with Corey. And I guess one thing I'll note is if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I think we'll leave time for questions at the end. So we'll maybe go directly from Corey's presentation to Emily's presentation, and then we'll have a question session for both of them. So with that, I will stop sharing and hand it over to you, Corey.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on again today. Appreciate the time here. We're going to talk. I think a lot of what I'm going to be doing today will be actually showing some examples of what we've done in the recent past, both in person and a couple of online ones. And I'll probably be tapping my colleague Tristan from Ohio to talk for a minute about his recent experience with the Cincinnati launch. But first, just wanted to go over and sort of reinforce from our perspective a couple of things that you heard Tushar talk about, and get into a little bit more on sort of the logistics side of things as well. So we'll cover two parts of this in the next couple of minutes here. One is working with partners. In our case, you're our partners, but just from our perspective, how that works. And then, as I mentioned, event logistics. But before we do that, one thing I just really wanted to drive home, and I know many of you have already done events like this in the past in other contexts, but really the most important things to get out of this really are good artifacts from it, pictures, stories, and then first and foremost, media coverage, something that can really drive rates for people coming to these groups. Are the three things that we hear most from people about how they hear about our work is heard from a friend, from a community partner organization, and earned media. They're by far the biggest sources. And when we get that good coverage, it's a really great way to get things off and running. We can always tell on Monday mornings when we come into our office and we've got a big stack of roof reviews because there was some event that was happening the previous week. And that's why we've got that big flow of people coming in. So with anything else, especially with logistics, when you're talking about coordinating, you do want to make sure you've got clear roles for everyone that's participating. So the partner roles, from our perspective, working with cities and with community partners, we want to make sure that we're dividing that up. So that might be on the partner side, extending invitations to people to be part of the proceedings. So inviting that elected official or county official, government official to participate, providing the venue, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, as well as helping with the media pitching. Oftentimes the communications staff and media staff with an organization already have those relationships, and that's a really great opportunity for us to use, as well as the work that we do. On our side, our role is often organizing the event itself, so making sure there's a clear run of show, filling in the other participants within that. Those might be community actors, they might be some of our staff, as well as the elected officials or other people that are joining. And then identifying participants that and stories that to include along the way that sort of broaden the scope. So that might be including an EV enthusiast or a solar ambassador to come and talk about their experience. And I've got some examples of that, as well as that media advisory preparation and that media pitching that's so important. In terms of the logistics, some key things to highlight here. I mentioned it earlier, but the right venue. So for St. Pete's, for example, and one of the cities that's involved in this cohort, and for past launch events, it's been a city hall, a police station, college campus, a museum, something that has some good visual appeal to it. And I'll show you some pictures of that later. Important to have a dedicated person taking pictures, whether it's a professional staff member or a volunteer, and that includes videos, as well as that good lighting and all of the things that you want to make sure those photographs turn out well. The one good thing about, really good thing about city provided venues is that a lot of the stuff is already sort of in place and you don't have to worry about it as much, like the parking and podiums and audio visual and air conditioning and seating capacity. All those things come together to make a good event. And when they're already sort of prepackaged, it makes it a lot easier. In terms of the participants, we've talked about this a lot already, but think about some things that might make it a little bit out of the box. As I mentioned earlier, EV owners love to bring their vehicles and show them off. That they can make a great backdrop, even having somebody participate who can talk about their experience with solar and EVs. as well as on the media side, getting that advisory out early, pitching early, really making a concerted effort to get somebody there. Not having any media there, you still can get some great pictures, but you also just sort of have a half event if you're not getting that good coverage. So it's worth it to put the time in and the effort in to make sure that those folks show up. Switching a little bit to the online, really considerations there, and I'll bring Tristan on to talk about his experience in a minute, but the idea is really practicing ahead of time, making sure you have a clear run of show, having somebody there to respond to chat questions is really important, as well as potentially even using remote recorded testimonials from people who are interested in talking about their experience to play during the event, or even live if you're up for the challenge. We've done that before as well. And then last but not least, afterwards, maximizing what you're doing with those artifacts, using those pictures, using that recorded video, following up with people in the group and in the community to make sure they know what's happened if they didn't see it in person, and really trying to use that to drive your participation from the community. So let's get to some of the examples here. I'll paste these into the chat when I'm done if you want to take a look at them, but here's just a few. The one on the bottom there, we've got a really great video from the St. Pete's launch with the mayor. We've got some other examples from other parts of the state of Florida that are video artifacts that we can use in later times as well. Very short 1 to 2 minute videos of people talking about why it's important for people to join the co-op from a face they might know or from an organization they know and trust already. Here, we just did one of these, stepping into the current cohort where we had an online event and had some really great success getting the mayor of Cincinnati to join. And I'm just going to pause here just for a second and turn it over to my coworker, our Ohio program director, Tristan Rader, so he can just say for a minute just about how that experience went and maybe a couple of key things that they kept in mind when planning it.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I'll say that firstly, putting in the legwork, and hats off to the Cincinnati team, Michael, Kelsey, and Jennifer, who you see there on the screen, for getting the mayor involved. It really helps the event kind of sail, and because we were able to get the attention, ended up with 100 people on the call, and it was just a really great launch. But one of the first things, Corey mentioned this, and it's just crucial that when you do these presentations, you're not doing a normal presentation to a nonprofit or to individuals, or you're doing it to the press more than anything. And it's really important to have a clear run of show at the beginning, a lineup. And you want to say why you're there once, and you want to say it again and again, and it's okay to repeat yourself. And it's okay to be concise and to the point, and not get into the nitty-gritty details, at least up in the front portion of what you're doing. And this is what we try to do with this slide, was putting a face to the name to make this very personal, like Corey mentioned, names and faces of people in the community that will be interacting, who folks will be interacting with when they're engaging with the program, and community partners like Canner, putting them up front and making sure that folks know that this is an effort that goes beyond just the city officials and our small nonprofit. Last thing I'll note is, what's most important here is, above and beyond that, is that to the leaders you bring these meetings and be watching, you want them to let you want your program to look good. This is your first and best opportunity to present solar to folks and to leaders in your community, and to your mayors potentially who will be showing up at these things. So you want your programs to look good. It's a great opportunity to make your program look good, and it's a good opportunity to make your mayor look good too. And if you make your mayor look good, especially around clean energy, they're going to want to continue to support clean energy as they move forward. And it just really is a really synergetic sort of event if you can hit it right and if you're able to plan it effectively. So thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Tristan. Couple more slides here just to show some examples, and just want to give you some sort of some of the visuals here. Some ones from our St. Pete launches. You can see that great solar canopy there. Venue can really be a great backdrop for what you're doing. Also, great people pictures. You want those smiling faces and people who are participating, including the media coverage that comes from it. So in this one example here from St. Pete. And this one I'll dwell on just for a second, having that personal story. So having somebody who can talk about their experience with solar and the impact can really drive a message home, especially for a reporter who might be there, in terms of why it's important for them. So just having those, those examples, having materials, if you're doing a live event, that people can take with them, making sure that you've got a good selection of participants from the community, and then ultimately really creating that message and that story. And I'll just leave the maybe the last one here I'm not sure if Sharon's with us today, but having your folks ready and ready to put on those t-shirts and that representation of what we're doing and what the event is about, and try to create that message, and using your time well for that 30-40 minutes or that you're planning, so that you're making that impact and getting your program off to a good start. So I'll stop there. Thanks so much for your time, and happy to take questions, and look forward to hearing from the rest of our speakers too. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Basham from the Connecticut Green Bank. I'm really happy to be with you all today and talk about the Solar for All Connecticut program, which is our version of a Solarize campaign. Tashar and Corey really covered a lot of the important pieces and really thorough presentation. So I'll just kind of share what we've done in Connecticut, and hopefully some of that redundancy will just kind of reinforce the really good ideas or the points that you really should make sure you cover for a campaign. So just quickly, I work at the Connecticut Green Bank. We're a quasi-public state agency. So the Solar for All program is a public-private partnership. So we're the public piece of that, and Posigen is the private piece of that. Together, we administer the Solar for All program here in Connecticut. Shout out to Ruta, who's on today, and I believe has participated in previous workshops as well. And so we offer the Solar for All program in Connecticut. And we really rely on our partnerships with local governments, with towns and cities across the state to run our campaigns. So a list of some of our partnerships that we've done since we launched this program in 2015. This next month, we'll be launching our 11th Solar for All campaign in Connecticut in the city of Norwalk. So I just want to share some of the highlights of things strategies that we've employed to make these successful kickoff events for the campaigns. I know you guys have already talked about in previous workshops your kind of overall timeline. I just wanted to highlight this is a generic timeline that we use and pass along to our towns who are interested in partnering with us on a campaign. It also comes with kind of an outline of what the Green Bank and Posigen will kind of cover, the roles that we'll have, and also what we expect from the town, so they can kind of understand, how many staffers, or maybe just one staffer needs to really take the lead on participating, and exactly what they need to be prepared for our 3 or 4 months that we're working together. But also just to highlight that we take about a little over a month to work with the town prior to actually kicking off the event. And if you have longer than a month available to you, even better. And what we do prior to the kickoff event is, have maybe weekly planning meetings. We try and develop almost all of the campaign materials that we'll try and use for the campaign ahead of time. And then we also try and to the extent possible, meet with various, community leaders or groups that we hope to support our campaign prior, and just introduce what we're planning to do, what the program is, what the solar offering is, and just see how we can collaborate and work together. So, and that is also really helpful for preparing for the kickoff event. So campaign planning, a key piece for us is, who is the audience? Are you hoping to drive homeowners to your kickoff event? Are you hoping that you really want to have press, or you really want to have potential campaign partners, or all three? And those are key considerations for what what logistics you might want to consider: the time of day, the location. If you really want to make sure that customers or homeowners participate, then you might have them after, and host your kickoff event in the evening, so that they can come after work. If you're hoping to get elected officials, they might be more likely to fit it into their workday. So that's just something to think about with who you're really trying to target to attend the kickoff event. So for us, our kickoff events the last few years have really aimed to be media opportunities or a photo op. And unless that pre-planning has given us really good channels to residents and homeowners, and we feel like we want to accommodate a kickoff event to make sure that they can attend. And so, our kickoff events have been less focused on homeowner events and more on inviting potential campaign partners and press to really introduce the campaign and show them all of the groups that are behind this effort, and really kind of bless the campaign for them to feel comfortable helping us throughout the campaign to host an event with their network or invite us to events that they're doing. And so in terms of how you make your kickoff event a media-worthy event, I found that sometimes it can be challenging to organize a standalone kickoff event where you're really trying to kind of pull brand new people that you're meeting to put time on their calendar to come to something that they maybe have heard little about so far. And sometimes it can be more successful if you can piggyback on an existing event and use that to also announce the campaign. So maybe it's, if it's in the fall and there's like a backpack giveaway at the schools, or it's the opening day of the farmers markets, or, there's some sort of city announcement that is relevant to sustainability. Those are things that you can kind of piggyback onto to help leverage the attendees that are already going to be there and increase your attendance. Another way to make your kickoff event media worthy is to have it at a meaningful location, a community center, or a high traffic area, or even to have your kickoff event be related to some sort of energy related event. Sometimes our towns in Connecticut have, light bulb giveaways, or they'll already be organizing something for Earth Day. So those sorts of things just make sense to coordinate. And then here's some photos of some of our municipal kickoffs that are really good examples of those three angles. So in the top left, the kickoff for the city of Hartford was also kind of piggybacked onto the office opening for Posigen's second office in the city of Hartford. So, which is also our capital. So we were able to invite the mayor, who's in the middle, cutting the ribbon for the new office. And he wants to be there because it means jobs and a new business coming to town. And we also were able to invite our state Department of Energy's commissioner, as well as the Habitat for Humanity Hartford executive director. So it was a great event that a lot of people wanted to participate in. On the top right is our kickoff for the City of Middletown Solar for All campaign, and that was at a community center that was really close to Town Hall. So it was easy for a lot of the leadership to come and join us. And then in the bottom photo is our kickoff for the Solar for All Hamden. That event featured our governor at the time, all the way to the right, Governor Malloy, who really takes sustainability and the Connecticut Green Bank as points of pride for his administration. And also in almost all of these photos is Posigen CEO Tom Neihart and the Green Bank's president, Brian Garcia. And then also all the way to the left are some city leaders in the town of Hamden. We have the superintendent of schools as well as the town's energy coordinator. So really bringing kind of state and local leadership. I think a lot of you are already kind of on that tip. I heard that in the breakout sessions. You want to have local leadership there. So that's really attractive and bringing press to an event, because you can leverage, those elected officials, press arms to help really prioritize getting press at your event. And it's also a key consideration if it's important for you to have leadership there, or if it's important for you to have, local community leaders, to think about what sort of logistics do you need to accommodate, having them there. Should it be during the workday? Should it be at a central location? And then also, I think Corey mentioned this, it's really important to designate an MC for these events, and then also write like a run of show. So we'll even write draft talking points if we're expecting elected officials to join us. They don't always use them. In fact, most of the time they don't. I've found elected leaders, they want the talking points, but then when the moment comes, they just riff. But I guess that's why they're good at their jobs. But it's nice to be prepared and have those things. Just quickly, I want to show some materials for what we use for our kickoff event, and just to highlight a couple of pieces. This is an invitation for a kickoff in the town of Hamden. We save it as a JPEG so that it can be inserted into an email invitation. It can be posted on social media. It's really easy to distribute to anyone that you've included in your pre-planning meetings. And then obviously highlight the speaker list. You want to showcase the people who are there. It really helps to legitimize the campaign, and including all of those partner logos is important. We always have Posigens, the Green Banks, the town. If we have any nonprofits that are joining us, those are really important kind of badges to include on your materials. And then we have an Eventbrite link, or more recently, been including QR codes to help people just easily sign up and be able to put it as a calendar event. I think in the virtual world, for me, if it's not on my calendar, it just doesn't really exist for me. So it's important to have that if there's people who are really, revolve around their calendars. And then a couple of other materials we've generated that we want to have ready for the kickoff event is your campaign flyer and also some canvassing maps. Posigen they're rock stars at canvassing, and we do that ahead of kickoff events as well to drive attendance to them, and just let people know that, even if they're not going to make it, we're kicking off the campaign. This I just wanted to highlight. We did 2 campaigns in 2020, so in the virtual world, where we really couldn't do in-person events. So how we kicked off was we had the mayor's office do a press release announcing the campaign and also announcing 2 webinars. One was a webinar specifically for the town department heads and various town staff, and the other one was for homeowners. So that we could introduce this program to people who work for the town. They represent the town in any of the initiatives, and maybe they're going to be asked about it and they want to know more. And so that was really to just say, hey, this is a program that you guys are, going to be, we're going to be running in the town for the next 3 months. And would you like to work with us? Would you like to, are you doing any events in the community that we can participate in? So that might be a strategy that you have to use if you're looking to kick off in the near future, and we're still doing things virtually. And then just quickly, I'm sure I'm getting short on time. I just wanted to highlight a mayor's letter, which is to the left. This is a letter that we draft that we have all of our towns who are doing a campaign with us. We have the mayor or first selectman sign this letter that is used to can be a mailing, or it's really helpful with our canvassing efforts. And this just says like, what is Solar for All? Why is it different? How can you get more information? And it can also announce your campaign kickoff as well, or any, couple of events that you have planned. And it just, with the city seal, really helps legitimize the effort. It's also really helped us with the door-to-door efforts, because depending on the town or the city, they may or may not be used to people knocking on their door, and it helps to set it apart from typical sales knocks, and helps give it the kind of that community feel to it. And then we also do, on the right hand side, are canvassing maps that we use to target specific neighborhoods that have really good potential for solar projects. So we want to prioritize not just canvassing, but what sort of businesses exist in there, what sort of community centers exist in these areas, and helps everybody really like visualize where we should be active. I think these are my last couple of slides, just showing some materials and some different things that we've done to, once it's kicked off, other events that we've had, kind of show and tell solar events in the community. So hopefully this solidifies some ideas that you guys have had in your minds of how to organize your campaigns, and happy to discuss any of the aspects for our 11 campaigns that we've run so far.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And thank you, Corey. That was a lot of information, a lot of like great insights and things to keep in mind. Yeah, I think let's open it up. I definitely have some questions, but let's open it up to participants first. I actually think I saw one other question in the chat from Dave. So Dave, if you want to unmute yourself and ask that question, or I can ask it for you.
Sure, thank you. Of course, I'm trying to look for the question now. But basically, I was wondering, we're thinking about having our mayor, if you will, like incorporate it into the state of the city address. It's coming up pretty quick. So I was wondering if anybody else has done that. If so, what were the things to be aware of? Obviously, it's like even more limited time than a separate event. Do we have them included in that? Do we do a separate event or kind of a tangential event? And then the second question was, has anybody done a second event once they hit like the halfway mark to try to generate more press?
I can start. We have events throughout the whole campaign, and they look different. We try to kind of have variety in the types of events that we're hosting. So it's not just having a campaign kickoff, but we've also tried to have tabling at high traffic areas, or join a farmer's market, join a neighborhood association meeting, or host like a solar show and tell with someone who's already gone solar and can be kind of an ambassador of the technology. So we try to have some sort of event, every month or every couple of weeks, to kind of keep it on people's minds and keep it kind of in their, on their radar for the span of the campaign period.
I would say I agree with that. We do regular events as well, because we select in our model, select the installer later in the campaign. For at least for a couple of the ones that were specifically low and moderate income targeted ones, like the one we did in DC, we did a separate event around the selection of the installer. So that's another opportunity to do that. But if you're doing multiple rounds, those are also chances to to have another event. Especially if the first one was successful, you can sort of project out that it was so successful, you're doing the next version of it, and that's another chance to get media.
And you may not even need to have an event to highlight that. You could do a press release that says, maybe you have a goal. You could say, we're halfway to our goal and we have this much time. Those sorts of things, like signal to people, like, people are doing it, why am I not doing it? And kind of gives that community buy-in. And then also highlighting the end of your campaign period. Those sorts of like time signals are really effective in getting people to like stop thinking about it and take action. So you could do that through a press release or a post. You wouldn't have to do it necessarily for an event if you don't have the momentum to really organize a second event.
Also good for celebrations at the end. Give out some awards, get people ready for the next rounds, highlight public officials who have supported it, community members. It's a great way to just get one last take and get people set up for the next time you do it.
Great. Does anyone else have a question? I want to, hold some space in case you haven't had a chance to put it in the chat function yet. Feel free to just unmute yourself, or put it in the chat function. We can read it out.
I'm seeing a question in the chat, Tushar. I don't know if you want me to mention it, but
Oh, sure. I must have missed it. Yeah.
well, it's just a kind of a discussion point. How are you addressing barriers that some homeowners might encounter regarding not being able to afford upfront cost?
Yeah, I think that's a maybe a bigger question that we have addressed in some previous workshops. So
Okay.
I think it might make sense there for us to follow up.
Sure.
Yeah, but if you had some thoughts, feel free.
I'm seeing it was kind of answered in chat. Okay.
And then looks like we had a question from Athena. Athena, do you want to unmute yourself?
I was just wondering how you decide, who do you approach? You go to the board, the city council, the mayor. I mean, we've worked with, RF100, some other associations.
Who to approach to participate in your kickoff event?
Correct.
I would say anyone and everyone. Sometimes, some people are going to be more receptive to the topic than others. And some of them might have, a track record of supporting various sustainability items in the town or the city before. So trying to find a champion there is really key. And it might mean approaching multiple people. And I think the higher, the higher the elected official, maybe the more visibility they would bring to the event. But I think having anybody is better than nobody.
Cool. Well, I think we can probably, so Ryan will have another Q&A session or hold another Q&A session in a bit. So if folks have questions that you haven't been able to ask, we'll have another chance to ask them. But real quick, just because Ruta, I see you've added some thoughts to the chat. Is there anything that you want to chime in on before we wrap up the session?
Well, yeah, with the question around who to invite, I just want to echo Emily with saying any and everybody is better than having no one. And if you can find a champion who is interested in solar and interested in the success of the campaign, it far outweighs maybe just the messenger. One other thing that we do in New Orleans is look for authenticity. So it may not even be a person who's that well known, but somebody who the community recognizes as an authentic person to be invited. So if that community leader or if that neighborhood association president or representative shows up, then at least their grouping of people are more apt to kind of uptake and consume the information. But warm intros So utilizing a network, if you know someone who knows someone, have them make even the smallest of introductions would seem like tends to bring people out.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Corey, Emily, and Ruda for offering your expertise and insights. We really appreciate it. I think we'll have a short, maybe a 2-minute break, and Ryan can share his a slide for that. But then when we come back at the hour, we can launch into a session about ongoing campaign management.
We'll spend the next half hour speaking to more of the ongoing campaign management strategies. So I'll just offer 2 quick slides to frame the conversation, and then we'll actually do more of kind of like a panel discussion with partners from Solarize Philly, including the Philadelphia Energy Authority, and then Solarize Decatur with Solar Crowdsource and some of their partners. So first, I just wanted to highlight some various campaign management tasks that should be done fairly regularly throughout the campaign. So first, and perhaps most important, is just simply scheduling recurring team meetings to make sure that you stay organized and stay on top of everything, and that the necessary team members are attending those. So the installer, the local government representative, community organization representatives as well. And in those meetings, a couple things to check on include reviewing the participants that signed up, reviewing the progress that they're making from going from signing up to signing a contract, as well as just checking on any feedback that they've provided, and asking those questions primarily to the installer, since they will have a lot of that information. And this is just an example of what that might look like. So first, on the left, for the participant information, likely your campaign will have some sort of back-end tracking file that lists the name, address, and hopefully whether they are, or what census tract that address is in, so that you can track that going forward. And then also for the progress, when they signed up, when they received a site visit, when they received a quote, and if they signed a contract, so that you can track where each participant is at. And then lastly, we found that it can be helpful to track, as people are signing up, as well as people are signing contracts, what % of those signups and contracts are in community of color census tracts or low and moderate income census tracts, so that you can potentially adjust your outreach strategy depending on that. And I'll get to that a little bit more on the next slide. Lastly, on the participants' experience, just asking the installer likely questions around average response time or any bottlenecks that they have experienced in their communications with the participants. And this has come up, this came up in the first part of the workshop, but continuing to plan ongoing events and outreach with your community partners. So in those meetings, talking about what went well in previous events, and then what future events should be planned and prepared for. And as it's been stated, not all of those have to be big major events. They could be, as simply as having attending is any type of kind of community event, and basically wherever there are people, just kind of making sure that your message is being received, and planning ongoing events to continue that momentum for the campaign. You'll also want to make sure that you update the webpage throughout the campaign, not only with an accurate number of signups and contracts, but also potentially adjusting the goal based on how many signups and contracts you're receiving, so that it always seems achievable, but yeah, not too far away. And then this has also been brought up multiple times, making sure that from events you're taking pictures, getting testimonials, and including that on the webpage, so that it seems like it's a really active campaign and that it's has a lot of momentum for it. Lastly, just a note of trying to convert signups into contracts. And one of the main aspects that we've seen that's essential there is just regular communication. So after someone signs up, making sure that they're receiving an automated email about the event, or as there are major milestones that the campaign achieves, making sure that those communications go out, any ongoing events, and especially any specific deadlines, making sure that that's being communicated. So just making sure that the team has someone responsible for each of these tasks can be important so that it can be managed accordingly. And the last slide I'm going to show is an example of what we've done for the Solarize Cincy campaign with Solar United Neighbors, by tracking sign-up demographics in order to inform how they might modify their outreach strategy. So this is a visualization of where their signups have been happening, and whether those signups are happening in LMI census tracts and or community of color majority census tracts. And it also helps to visualize how widespread is the message being received, and are there any communities that are really taking hold. And I'm not going to include the specific percentages here in case that's sensitive, but we did include what percentage of those signups are in LMI neighborhoods or communities of color, in order to understand and track that throughout the campaign and adjust accordingly. So this is an example of what we did with Cincinnati, but can definitely do that for other campaigns. So reach out to us if this would be a helpful analysis to do throughout your campaign as well. So that's just a quick overview of framing the conversation. What the rest of about 20 or 25 minutes we have here is going to be for expert reflections in a Q&A panel. So first, we have a couple of representatives from the Solarize Philly campaigns. So we have Jackson Kuziak from, who is a solar consultant for Solar States and was the primary installer for their campaign. Mavish Ilias, who's been on a lot of our workshops in the past, the solar projects coordinator for Philadelphia Energy Authority. And then lastly, Chris Spar, the executive director of Centennial Parkside CDC. And apologies if I mispronounced any of those names. We also have some representatives from the Solarize Decatur to Cab campaign. So we have Michael Black, who is the chair of the Environmental Sustainability Board for the city of Decatur. Don Moreland, the founder of Solar Crowdsource, who's been on a lot of our workshops as well in the past to help project manage that effort. And then Jeanette Gayer, who is the executive director from Environment Georgia. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just start with a question to both of those efforts. So maybe I'll start with Mavish and then to Don to just give a brief overview for those that aren't as familiar with your efforts. When did your campaign happen, or is it still happening? And what were some of the goals and outcomes of that? And who were some of the main partners? So maybe start with Mavish and then we'll go to Don after that.
Sure, thank you so much, Ryan. Hello, everyone. I'm Mavish, the Solar Projects Coordinator with the Philadelphia Energy Authority. I'm sure some of you know me already because I've made some friends through these workshops. And I'm really excited to be back here today with two of our partners, Solar States and Centennial Parkside CDC, who've supported us tremendously with the rollout and implementation of our LMI solar program, also known as the Solar Savings Grant Program. So for those of you who are not familiar, we launched the Solarize Philly campaign in 2017, which is a citywide initiative to help all Philadelphians go solar. And the program has evolved to become the largest Solarize initiative in the whole country. To date, we have received signups from more than 6,000 property owners in Philadelphia, and 750 of those people who signed up have already signed a contract to go solar. But at the same time, it's at the heart of the organization to make sure that solar is accessible to everyone. So to achieve this goal, we launched the Solar Savings Grant Program, which is a special offering for low and moderate income households last year, with the goal of supporting at least 50 LMI households to go solar through the pilot phase. And I'm really excited to share that as of this morning, we have already signed a contract or signed contracts with 43 LMI households with few other projects in the pipeline. So the program has been designed in a way that there are no credit requirements to participate. The only eligibility requirements are that the total household income of the participant must be below 80% of the area median income, and that the customer should have paid their electric bills on time. There is no upfront cost to participate in the program. And through this program, the Philadelphia Energy Authority provides a grant to eligible customers that covers a significant portion of the total installation cost. And for the remaining cost, we have arranged for a solar loan, for 15-year term. So just to give you an example, the system price for a 5 kilowatt system in the market outside of the program is about $16,000. And for LMI customers within the program, the same system size would cost about $5,000 to $6,000, which is 1/3 of the market price, right? So the savings and the discount that we offer through the program are really significant. And this is a perfect example of how different public and private partners came together to make solar more accessible for LMI households. So the reason why Philadelphia Energy Authority is able to cover a significant portion of the installation cost is with the help of a grant that we received from the state, in addition to the Solarize Philly program fee that we've been collecting from the installers who've been participating in the program. And for the remaining cost, Centennial Parkside CDC, who we have on the call, provided funding to finance a solar loan. The funding is being serviced through another partner called Knife, and Solar States, who we also have on the call, is our installation partner for the pilot phase. So I hope that overview was helpful, and happy to take any questions and dive into the panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mavish. Thanks for the overview. I'll get into some of the more project management questions related to this section in a moment, but also want to give Don and your partners a chance to give an overview of your experience with Solarize Decatur to Cab over the last couple of years. So Don, if you could give a quick overview of that effort, that'd be great. And Don, I can't hear you, but I see you speaking, so I'm not sure if there's an audio connection issue. Let me check to make sure that we haven't muted you for some reason. Well, in the meantime, Don, because I'm not getting any audio, maybe if you could rejoin, leave the room and rejoin, sometimes that does it. Ken, I know you were also, I believe, involved in that effort. If you want to give an overview, that'd be great. Or if not, I know we also have Jeanette and Chris here that could, or excuse me, Jeanette and Michael here that could speak to it as well.
Yeah, go to Michael because they've worked directly on that project. I'm only familiar with it, if you could.
Okay, great.
Can you hear
Michael,
me okay?
Yeah, Michael, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Great. It looks like Don is rejoining back, so I don't want to steal his thunder. You want to try your audio again, Don?
Yeah, is this better? Okay.
Yes, you can hear you now.
What I was trying to say is Mavish is always a tough act to follow. So Ryan, I do not appreciate you putting me right after her. And Michael, your background is also tough to follow. So that's what I get for the audio, I guess. Yeah, I want to thank Michael and Jeanette for being here today as part of the Solarize Decatur DeKalb campaign. That campaign ran through all of last year. It actually started right in the middle of the beginning of the lockdowns and the pandemic. So we had to adjust things pretty quickly. And there was actually a question of whether we were going to move forward at all. I'm glad we did, because we had to move everything to virtual, and there's a lot of challenges, but we also learned a lot of lessons along the way. And it ended up that the campaign is the most successful Solarize campaign we've had so far. And you just never know what it's going to lead to. But we had 152 contracts total, a new solar capacity added to the Decatur and DeKalb County area, which is in Metro Atlanta, of over 1.1 megawatts. We also sold a lot of batteries, over 350 kilowatt hours of batteries. And we project the local economic development, and this is just local clean energy development in the area exceeded $3.5 million. And we project also that we were able to save folks over $700,000 off the cost of solar just through the bulk purchasing and group aspect of the program. And so it was there was a great deal of challenges. There's no doubt, having to go through shift everything to virtual. We had never really had to experience that before. But we learned that there's a lot of stuff you can do with social media that we had never tried before. Videos and really great photos are a way to accomplish that. And we actually, since we weren't traveling a lot, we were able to actually put on more events and more specific events that were able to kind of drill down to specific constituencies, of participants in the campaign. So there's your background for Solarize Decatur, DeKalb, and it's been exciting to work with these folks.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Well, now let's get into some of the more questions related to campaign management. I know that it looks like there's a question more around equity in the chat there, but I might pause on that just for a second to get some of the more management strategies in, and then get to that question in a second. So starting with Don and Mavish, how often did you have meetings with the core team, the installer, and community partners to stay organized? And how often did you, in those meetings, did you track participant sign-up metrics?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have recurring weekly meetings with Jackson because he's the one who works closely with the customers and he manages our sales process. And during those meetings, we go through all the projects in detail and talk about any customer issues. And then I also meet with the overall Solar States core team on a bi-weekly basis just to get a sense of how everything is going and if there are any interconnection or permitting delays. And then with Centennial Parkside CDC, I submit a monthly report, which includes all the program numbers in addition to any install photos or any supporting materials. And at the organizational level, we have quarterly board meetings where we report the success and updates on the program. And then our CEO and president, of Philadelphia Energy Authority also has meetings with the council president just to talk about how the program is moving forward against our KPIs.
Thanks, Mavish. Don, how does that stack up against your recurring meetings?
Yeah, I know that there's regular touch points with the contractor because there's or contractors. There's a lot of things that happen during the course of a campaign. So that line of communication is always open with them, and the more you can facilitate that conversation, I think the more successful your campaign is going to be. And we do have bi-monthly meetings with a steering committee. And so we try to schedule these at the same time, twice. So say it's like 4 o'clock every other Monday or something like, the first Monday or the third Monday. We try to keep it a very regular schedule like that so people can plan for it. And in those meetings, we first start with updates from the contractor. We take a look at the pipeline and how many signups, how many contracts, any complaints, things of that nature that the coalition and the steering committee can help out with. But we also provide reports on website hits and social media, any blog posts. We try to track those kind of numbers to track the interest, and it really gives us an opportunity to kind of troubleshoot what's working and what's not working in terms of outreach. And then we'll talk about the past events that we've had and what we maybe have learned there and follow up on those events. Then we'll talk about future events. So we try to also have around 1 or 2 events every month, usually an all-inclusive what we call a town hall meeting. So residential, commercial, anybody, the public is invited to this meeting. And of course, everything is virtual right now. And so those are just basic general campaign meetings. And then we'll focus in with another meeting that month with specific workshops, like a financing workshop or an LMI workshop or a commercial business sector workshop. And it's really great to kind of schedule those as much in advance as you can. There's a difference between practice and reality. And you got to really be nimble and be able to make adjustments along the way. But we try to keep to as much of a schedule as we can. And then after we talk about events, we'll open it up. We have different working groups. We have an LMI working group. We have a workforce development working group. So we want to hear from them and then open it up for discussion after that. Each meeting is usually around an hour. Maybe it goes over just a little bit over an hour.
Can I, Ryan, emphasize, I feel like every campaign we have to kind of train the installer to like come prepared to like share those numbers quickly at the beginning of the meeting. So I would just emphasize to everybody, like, get your installer ready to answer those questions of like, what are the numbers? Because for whatever reason, those aren't the numbers that they're always tracking. And I think the things that we always spend some time thinking through are, well, first of all, just number of signups. So if the signups are low, that's obviously something you need to deal with. But then looking at that ratio of like signups to consults, so you can see, is the installer not getting to people? And is there a way that, you know, the steering committee needs to, or core, it sounds like whatever you're calling your group needs to weigh in. And then also looking at later in the campaign, you need to look at, of all the people that have had a consult, how many people have actually signed a contract? So looking at that ratio and making sure that the installer is ready to, I don't want to say defend, that sounds kind of mean, but like is able to talk about why that number is low, if it is low, and, you know, have a brainstorm about how to fix that problem. So we've had, I remember campaigns where we've like, everybody has kind of phone banked people and just gone, hey, we understand you have a contract in your hand. Can we answer any questions, kind of thing. So it's not just the installer. And then, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Jeanette. If you had a second point, definitely feel free to add that.
I was going to say, we have in Atlanta, I remember I loved your map. That was amazing. So if we can figure out how to make that happen everywhere, that would be great. What I did was had our interns basically just put like a pin in every installation in the map in Atlanta, and then looked at where haven't we, where don't we have any installs or contracts signed? And then the three things we would usually do is work with the city council person to hold an event in that district if there was like a city council member that, you know, was representing a neighborhood that we didn't have any contracts. We would also do flyering, so send people out to just put flyers on people's doors. And then there was one other thing that I'm forgetting, but.
Yeah, that's great. I might want to give Jackson a chance to follow up, since we do have an installer on the call to talk to your first point, Jeanette, on those meetings with the installer and how that goes. So Jackson, feel free to add anything there. And then after that, I might let Dr. Erica Holloman-Hill unmute herself to just expand on her question of how equity is addressed in campaign management. But let's start with Jackson.
Hi, yes, thank you for the time. You know, just to piggyback on what other folks have said, it's really important to have those regular check-ins. And, you know, in the world of Zoom and Zoom fatigue, it's important that those check-ins don't always have to be an hour long. Sometimes it can be just a quick 20-30 minute check-in where we can go over some of the metrics, some of the problems. I do also want to talk about equity and how, you know, I'm sure we'll all get into this, but, you know, for us, this was baked into the process of building the LMI program. When we were looking for financiers, we wanted to make sure that the financier was offering a loan that didn't have a credit requirement, so that wasn't a barrier for people. When we were doing outreach for LMI, we were going around to different community associations and neighborhood groups, as well as churches, and, you know, going beyond just like city council and what, the council can offer, and, trying to work with block captains in neighborhoods in Philadelphia that are underserved, and making sure that that's happening from the beginning. Our partners with Centennial Parkside CDC already have a lot of those connections, and they were able to, help us secure that good financing. But, the process of creating our particular LMI program took 3 years before we got it off the ground. And so a lot of that was baked into how we were going to run it. We ran our Solarize campaign for 3 years before we were able to really launch the LMI program.
Thanks, Jackson.
I think if I could just build on Jackson really quick. I'm Chris Spar from the Centennial Parkside CDC. And I think with the program in Philadelphia, it was kind of a perfect storm in that Solar States, they have equity built into their business model. The Philadelphia Energy Authority was really trying to reach equitable measures through the Solarize Philly program. And then we happen to be a community-based organization who was already emphasizing solar energy within our community. And so when we started to have conversations about launching this program, we basically had already had funders in the wings who wanted to get behind the idea of financing low and moderate income households, because we had identified through our community engagement baked into our work within one neighborhood that high energy costs were a major issue in the neighborhood, and they wanted to figure out a way to bring those down. So we were searching for ways to narrow that equity gap when it relates to solar energy. And so when this worked out, we were able to offer, a loan at 3% interest to make the numbers work for low and moderate income families, which then ends up being sort of a sustainable revenue model for a community-based organization, because we can get that money back with interest and then circulate it back into low and moderate income solar projects. And so the whole project was just a perfect storm of meeting the equity measures that we wanted to, because of the 3 different partners here. And in certain ways, lucky, but in certain ways, it was just very intense partners that happened to come together at the right time.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I see Dr. Erica Hallman-Hill just put her video on, so I'll let you unmute and expand on your question if you'd like, on how equity is being, or what equity is looking like in this process of campaign management.
Yeah, and so I just want us to when I say equity, to move beyond demographics, even thinking, when we think solar, we think rooftop. But I know if solar is on a pole, we can talk now dual axis, and where that solar panel has the opportunity to follow the sun. So where are we in? One, there's no box, so we're not stepping outside of the box, but just thinking kind of where we know some of the barriers are. So I say, for example, a lot of homes that need energy efficiency upgrades, or that roof needs to be fixed before we can even address solar. Does that mean that you shouldn't have solar? No, because solar panels can go on poles or other aspects beyond the roof. So when I'm thinking equity, just all of the various ways, even down to the narrowness that I see in the solar conversation, where solar has to go on roofs, and that's not the case. And so that's one aspect of it, but also too, when we're talking about equity in this process, and so not just at the tail end, but are those vulnerable populations that you hope to serve, are they in the very beginning of your process at this table, and even helping you to come up with what your plan is? I'm sorry, I'm just seeing all the chats coming in. And so for me, just to start that conversation, because again, I'm very clear as a Earth system scientist, the technology exists. What we're really talking about is the will of man and the will of those to make it work, because what we're dealing with is a financial thing. And so for me, if the upfront cost is one of the huge barriers, what does it look like to have a mutual aid container, some things that we're looking at that would collectively, because of the size, be able to take something like a debt where an individual couldn't take that debt, but the collective pot could for a community. So again, just various ways to think about how we can finance these. And then two, what I've yet to really hear, and Jeanette, I asked you this in our meeting, can somebody please give me a breakdown of labor versus cost? Because if we're talking raw materials, I know that there's a solar company, panel company in North Georgia, where even if we're talking about the actual putting together of the panels themselves, that becomes a workforce pathway. And so is most of the cost in the labor, or is it in the raw material? So if, like most construction, my husband does general contracting, so I see that when we look at just the materials, it's a different price versus materials and labor. And if the labor piece is where a lot of the bulk is, then can some of that cost be reduced through workforce development programs? I hear on one end, these companies that are doing the installation say that they can't find people of color who've been trained, but I know that there are lots of programs coming into our communities talking about solar training and getting these trainings. And so just kind of looping up some of the gaps that I see in this solar conversation to even reduce the cost here. So some of the things that I've just been thinking around what equity means to me in this conversation. So that's what I mean. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Yeah, thank you for that as well. And I would start with, I'm sorry that you weren't able to join some of the initial workshops, because I think we got into some of those aspects early on, and that's why our very first workshop was on having the right community partners in the room. So it would just definitely echo the first sentiment you had on making sure that the frontline organizations are there from the beginning. On some of the more detailed questions that you brought up on pricing, I might table that until an individual follow-up that I think we have with Atlanta in a couple weeks, because I know we are running a little bit short on time, and wanted to see if there are any questions related to the specific topic of campaign management, kind of related to questions for the installers, or what types of events did you plan for, and what types of and how did you engage community stakeholders, things like that. But can definitely follow up afterwards with you, Dr. Erica.
But also maybe just want to lift up, like, I think that at least like there were some relevant points there about like how are we bringing like our like community partners, or like folks who are trying to work with LMI communities like into the campaign management process. Have either of the groups done that? I feel like there were a lot of points that Dr. Erica brought up that are relevant to the campaign management process too.
I can speak a little bit to the work that we've been doing. So, just a couple things that Dr. Holloman had brought up in relation to workforce development. So Solar States, we do education as well as installation, and we run 5 different vocational training, different training facilities and classes throughout the year. Most of them are located in North Philadelphia. And we found that not only were we able to hire people out of those programs and provide them with living wage jobs, and that labor does take up a big portion of, what goes into the solar installation cost, but that, bringing those, once you add the cost of the panels and everything and the labor, that overall cost starts to balloon. And so the grant funding that we were able to get, the loan financing that we were able to get with the help of Centennial Parkside and with the help of the Philadelphia Energy Authority, was able to bring down those costs without putting a burden on the installer to pay our employees less or not offer them benefits or things of that nature. And one thing that's really important for us as well in terms of bringing people into the process, there's one neighborhood in North Philadelphia called Hunting Park that has not seen any solar development whatsoever. And so some of the churches in that area were looking to bring solar to their constituents and to their own rooftops. And so we helped them create a Hunting Park specific community solar initiative where they're bringing vocational training, and then they're touching on some of those other aspects that you brought up related to people who may not have good quality roofs or may have old electrical systems in their house, and providing grant funding to them to get their roof fixed in an energy efficient manner, get their electric panel fixed before we come with a low cost grant funded solar initiative for them. And then using that vehicle of a community-based solar initiative to be then, basically a feeder into our low and moderate income program. So we may only have funding to do 50 projects right now, but our goal is to have this run, in perpetuity. And so we're going to need to continue to have these outreach nodes, different community groups that we're working with that we can, continue to engage throughout the process, and can point out some of the blind spots that we may have around, rooftops, or the, various other barriers that may exist before people can actually take that step and go solar, even if the solar itself is low cost. So that's something that we're working on. I'm happy to share, connect people with some of the work that's going on in North Philadelphia and in Hunting Park. But that's, some dreams that we have for the future, that this program would continue to be funded, and that we could, make these community solar initiatives even more robust as we develop the larger Solarize Philly bucket. For the entire city, we need to focus on the specific neighborhoods that are not seeing a solar development as quickly as other neighborhoods.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. And I had also, because I'm cognizant that Michael hasn't had a chance to really chime in yet, and I saw your response in the chat, Michael, response to Erica on what equity has looked like, and kind of related to campaign management on where solar installations are going. So feel free to expand on that.
Thanks. So City of Decatur has a program called the Martin Luther King Jr. Service Project, which started on Martin Luther King Day. It was getting volunteer residents out to help low income, in particular seniors within the community, to do repairs and retrofits on their houses. And our Solarize campaign for DeKalb Decatur, the second one, 2.0, prioritized getting solar on some of those houses, working with the Martin Luther King Jr. Service Project. Some of those houses got new roofs through the Martin Luther King Jr. Solar Project, or Martin Luther King Jr. Service Project, and we added those to the list to look and see which ones would solar work for, and then talk to the residents. And you might be surprised, but a lot of people turned down free solar. They were not interested, whether they thought this was a gimmick and they didn't want to have COVID exposure. But we had a number who did. And so we're working with them right now to get free solar on their houses to reduce their energy burden. The great thing for me is one of those is my neighbor right across, right around the corner from where I live. You're muted.
I'm muted. There we are. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the added context there. If there's maybe one last question, we can field that. If not, I know we're a bit tight on our initial schedule, so would also love to allow some time for breakouts as well. All right, well, if not, just want to thank our speakers. I know there was not a lot of time, and a lot of our speakers had great insight. So hopefully you had a chance to get through what you were hoping to, but just want to thank Jackson, Mavish, Chris, Michael, Don, and Jeanette for coming on to share their insights on campaign management. I just wanted to wrap up our last workshop with some kind of exciting news that all 19 communities in this cohort, so 21 cities and counties, 2 of which are partnering with each other, so 19 campaigns. All of those communities are planning to implement a campaign in the coming months. So an exciting kind of 100% likely implementation rate, which is exciting. And I wanted to share a couple of those timelines so that everyone has a sense of when these campaigns are going to be active. So starting here with all of the cities and counties that are working with Solar United Neighbors. So Duluth, St. Pete, Plano, Cincinnati, and just recently Miami-Dade County, Miami Beach, all of their solar co-ops are actually live right now. And a few of those have been active for a couple weeks now. And then Houston and Columbus's will be starting in a couple weeks. And then for Richmond, Henrico County, theirs is also starting this week. New Orleans is a little bit more of an ongoing effort, and Long Beach's will be later this summer. And those 3 cities are working with a specific local partner to help implement that effort and project manage that. For Asheville, Atlanta, and Savannah, working with Solar Crowdsource, their campaigns are just about to launch as well, so that's exciting. And then the last few cities here are taking a little bit more of a city project manager role, and a lot of those campaigns are starting more this summer and then later in the summer and fall as well. So just kind of a screenshot here of exciting news that all of the cohort participants are planning to implement a campaign in the coming months. And hopefully we can work with each other and leverage each other's experiences over the coming months with office hours that we'll have, which I'll get to in a second here. So for next steps, we'd love, from this workshop's content, if you could develop that launch event plan and any materials using our template if necessary. And then the next steps from here are to schedule a one-on-one meeting with Tushar and I so that we can kind of shift our support to more individual support over the coming months instead of the virtual workshop format. Also an FYI that SolSmart is actually hosting a webinar on April 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And it's specifically related to cities in this cohort that are working with Solarize campaigns inclusive to marginalized communities. And they've let us know that you might qualify for SolSmart designation and some of their additional support given your participation in this cohort. So feel free to flag that and RSVP for that webinar that I'll include in my follow-up email. And then very lastly, send us your successes. So as your campaigns get started, launch events, press releases, any milestones, please send those my way because we'd love to see that as well. So thank you all again. This is our last workshop.